The Hidden Renaissance, Leonardo's revolutionary understanding of feminine intelligence, and the candlelit workshop of Leonardo da Vinci's Milan studio in 1495. A young apprentice named Giovanni discovered something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his master's genius. Hidden among Leonardo's anatomical sketches and engineering blueprints were dozens of detailed portraits and studies of women that revealed not just artistic skill, but a profound philosophical understanding of feminine intelligence that was centuries ahead of its time. What Giovanni uncovered that night wasn't just evidence of Leonardo's artistic interests, but proof of a revolutionary worldview that recognized women as intellectual equals in an era when such ideas could be considered heretical. Leonardo's relationship with women wasn't defined by the conventional romantic entanglements that characterized most men of his era, but by something far more radical and intellectually dangerous: genuine respect for feminine intelligence and creative capacity. In a time when women were largely excluded from formal education and intellectual discourse, Leonardo sought out the company of learned women, collaborated with female artists and scholars, and developed philosophical ideas about the complementary nature of masculine and feminine thinking that wouldn't be widely accepted for another 4 centuries. The evidence of this revolutionary perspective was hidden in plain sight throughout Leonardo's work, but it required careful observation to understand its full implications. His portraits of women from the Mona Lisa to Lady Renown with an ermine weren't simply artistic exercises but philosophical statements about the depth and complexity of feminine consciousness. Unlike other Renaissance artists who portrayed women primarily as objects of beauty or religious devotion, Leonardo captured something deeper: the intelligence, creativity, and spiritual depth that he recognized as uniquely feminine contributions to human understanding. Have you ever noticed how some of history's greatest innovators seem to have had unusually progressive views about human potential that were far ahead of their time? Giovanni's discovery began with what appeared to be simple anatomical studies, but closer examination revealed that Leonardo's investigations into female anatomy were driven by intellectual curiosity rather than artistic necessity. The master had conducted detailed studies of women's brains, not because he was commissioned to do so, but because he was genuinely curious about the relationship between physical structure and mental capacity. In an era when most scholars accepted without question that women possessed inferior intellectual abilities, Leonardo was conducting empirical research to test these assumptions. What Leonardo discovered through his anatomical investigations contradicted the prevailing wisdom of his time. His detailed studies revealed no significant differences in brain structure that would support claims of feminine intellectual inferiority. More importantly, his observations of living women, their problem-solving abilities, creative insights, and emotional intelligence convinced him that feminine and masculine minds operated differently but with equal sophistication and capability. Understanding profoundly influenced Leonardo's approach to learning and creativity. Unlike his male contemporaries who relied primarily on logical, linear thinking, Leonardo developed what modern cognitive scientists would recognize as an integrated approach that combined analytical reasoning with intuitive insight, systematic observation with creative speculation, and technical precision with artistic vision. He understood that the greatest breakthroughs came from combining traditionally masculine and feminine approaches to understanding. The philosophical implications of Leonardo's insights were staggering for their time. If women possessed intellectual capabilities equal to men's, then the entire social and educational structure of Renaissance society was built on false premises. If feminine ways of thinking offered unique and valuable perspectives, then excluding women from intellectual discourse was not just morally wrong but practically stupid. Leonardo's recognition of these truths put him in the dangerous position of understanding realities that his society wasn't ready to accept. Giovanni's investigations revealed that Leonardo had secretly tutored several women in mathematics, engineering, and natural philosophy that were not only unusual but potentially dangerous in an era when educated women were often suspected of witchcraft. Among his papers were detailed correspondence with women scholars across Europe, exchanges of ideas about everything from hydraulic engineering to human anatomy, and collaborative projects that demonstrated the intellectual partnerships Leonardo valued. One of the most remarkable discoveries was evidence of Leonardo's collaboration with a woman, known only as Isabella the mathematician, who appears to have contributed significantly to his understanding of geometric principles and their application to artistic composition. Their correspondence revealed not a teacher-student relationship, but an intellectual partnership between equals who challenged and inspired each other's thinking. This collaboration helped explain some of the mathematical sophistication that characterized Leonardo's greatest artistic achievements. Can you think of ways that excluding or undervaluing certain groups of people might be limiting our collective potential for innovation and understanding? Leonardo's revolutionary understanding of women extended beyond individual relationships to broader philosophical insights about the nature of creativity and intelligence. He developed the theory that true genius required the integration of what he called solar and lunar consciousness, analytical and intuitive, systematic and creative, focused and holistic. He believed that most men had been trained to overdevelop solar qualities while suppressing lunar ones, while women had been forced to overdevelop lunar qualities while being denied access to solar development. This insight led Leonardo to consciously cultivate both types of consciousness in his own thinking, which explains the unique combination of scientific precision and artistic vision that characterized his work. His greatest innovations came from his ability to approach problems both analytically and intuitively, to combine systematic observation with creative speculation, and to integrate technical knowledge with aesthetic understanding. He understood that complete intelligence required both traditionally masculine and feminine ways of knowing. The philosophical sophistication of Leonardo's ideas about gender and intelligence becomes even more remarkable when considered within the context of his time. While his contemporaries were debating whether women had souls, Leonardo was developing theories about the complementary nature of masculine and feminine consciousness that wouldn't be seriously considered by mainstream psychology until the 20th century. His insights anticipated modern research about brain hemispheres, cognitive styles, and the benefits of intellectual diversity. Giovanni's discovery also revealed Leonardo's frustration with the intellectual limitations imposed by his era's gender restrictions. In his private notebooks, the master wrote passionately about the waste of human potential created by denying women access to education and intellectual development. He understood that society was losing half of its creative and analytical capacity by excluding women from scientific, artistic, and philosophical pursuits. This frustration helps explain Leonardo's famous reclusiveness and his tendency to work on projects in isolation. He had developed insights and formed intellectual partnerships that he couldn't discuss openly without risking accusations of heresy or corruption. His revolutionary understanding of human potential had to remain largely hidden, expressed only through the subtle details of his art and the coded language of his private writings. The evidence suggests that Leonardo's most famous works were partly intended as coded arguments for the intellectual equality of women. The Mona Lisa's enigmatic expression can be understood as a representation of the depth and complexity of feminine consciousness that Leonardo recognized but that his society refused to acknowledge. Lady with an Ermine portrayed a woman scholar holding the symbol of philosophical wisdom, a radical statement about feminine intellectual capacity disguised as a conventional portrait. Have you ever had to hide or disguise ideas that were too advanced or controversial for your environment? And how did that affect your ability to fully express your potential? Leonardo's understanding of women also influenced his approach to education and knowledge transmission. Unlike the formal, hierarchical teaching methods that dominated Renaissance education, Leonardo developed more collaborative and experiential approaches that honored different learning styles and cognitive preferences. His workshop became a model of intellectual community that transcended traditional social boundaries, bringing together people of different backgrounds, genders, and intellectual approaches. The master's insights about feminine intelligence also shaped his understanding of creativity itself. He recognized that the greatest artistic and scientific breakthroughs required what he called the marriage of opposites, the integration of logical analysis with intuitive insight, systematic investigation with creative speculation, technical precision with aesthetic vision. This understanding helped him develop the integrated approach to learning and creation that produced his most revolutionary innovations. Giovanni's discoveries revealed that Leonardo's apparent lack of conventional romantic relationships wasn't due to disinterest in women, but rather to his recognition that the intellectual partnerships he valued were impossible within the social constraints of his time. The women who shared his interests and could match his intellectual curiosity were largely inaccessible due to social restrictions, while the women who were socially available often lacked the education and intellectual development that he found essential for meaningful connection. This situation created a profound loneliness that permeated much of Leonardo's later work. His notebooks contain poignant reflections on the isolation that comes from understanding truths that cannot be shared, from developing insights that must remain hidden, and from forming intellectual connections that cannot be openly acknowledged or fully explored. He was centuries ahead of his time in understanding human potential, but this advancement came at the cost of deep personal isolation. The philosophical implications of Leonardo's insights extend far beyond Renaissance history to contemporary questions about human potential, intellectual diversity, and social progress. His recognition that excluding any group from intellectual development diminishes collective human capacity remains relevant in modern discussions about education, workplace diversity, and social justice. His understanding that the greatest innovations come from integrating different cognitive approaches offers insights for contemporary challenges in science, technology, and creative problem-solving. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested in discovering how history's greatest minds developed revolutionary insights that were far ahead of their time. Like this video if you believe that understanding human potential requires looking beyond conventional social limitations. Share this with someone who's ready to explore how intellectual diversity and inclusion might be keys to solving today's most complex challenges. Leonardo's story reveals the personal cost of intellectual isolation and the importance of finding communities that can appreciate and support advanced thinking. His loneliness wasn't just personal but philosophical, isolation that comes from understanding realities that your society isn't ready to accept. This isolation may have contributed to his tendency to leave projects unfinished and his gradual withdrawal from public life in his later years. The revolutionary nature of Leonardo's insights about women and intelligence helps explain why his ideas remained largely hidden and misunderstood for centuries. His recognition of feminine intellectual capacity was so far ahead of its time that even modern scholars have only recently begun to understand the full implications of his philosophical positions. The evidence was always there in his art and writings, but it required a cultural evolution in understanding gender and intelligence to recognize what he was actually saying. Leonardo's approach to understanding women also reveals his broader methodology for challenging conventional wisdom and discovering truth. He combined empirical observation with philosophical speculation, tested inherited beliefs against direct experience, and remained open to conclusions that contradicted established authorities. This methodology enabled him to recognize truths about human nature that wouldn't be widely accepted for centuries. The master's insights about the complementary nature of masculine and feminine consciousness offer a framework for understanding not just individual development, but collective human potential. His recognition that true genius requires integrating different cognitive approaches suggests that our greatest challenges might be solved by consciously combining diverse perspectives and ways of thinking rather than privileging any single approach. Leon's relationship with women ultimately reveals his relationship with truth itself, a commitment to understanding reality regardless of social conventions, a willingness to challenge established authorities when they contradicted evidence, and the courage to develop and maintain insights that isolated him from his contemporaries. His story reminds us that the greatest discoveries often require the willingness to think beyond the limitations of our time and culture. The forbidden truth about Leonardo's relationship with women isn't about romance or sexuality, but about recognition. His revolutionary understanding that human intelligence transcends gender, that creativity benefits from diverse perspectives, and that society's greatest potential lies in developing and integrating all forms of human consciousness rather than privileging some while suppressing others. Your own potential for innovation and understanding might be limited by similar cultural blind spots that prevent you from recognizing and developing capacities that don't fit conventional expectations. Leonardo's example suggests that true genius often requires the courage to look beyond social limitations and the wisdom to integrate diverse approaches to knowledge and creativity. The legacy of Leonardo's forbidden truth continues to inspire those who recognize that human potential is far greater than any single era's understanding, and that our greatest discoveries often come from questioning assumptions that everyone else takes for granted.